The British TV series UFO. This is episode 17.
You're listening to 70s Trek with Bob Turner and Kelly Casto, the fan podcast that looks at Star Trek in the 1970s. It was the decade that built a franchise.
The year was 1971. That's when American audiences were exposed to a British science fiction show with an American actor as the lead. I'm Bob Turner.
And I'm Kelly Casto. The British TV show UFO came to the United States. And this kid growing up in the 70s loved it. I guess other kids did too.
I know I was one of them. It was so cool. I know I watched it every chance I could. And I'm really looking forward to talking about UFO, Cal. But I think first we should tell our listeners how to find us. What do you think?
Yeah, it's probably a good idea. So you can find us at our Facebook page. Just go to facebook.com/70s Trek. When you get there, leave a comment, like a question, whatever.
You can also find us at iTunes. Yes, the show's on iTunes. Just search 70s Trek. And please, when you get there, give us a rating and a review, and it will help other Star Trek listeners find our show. Oh, man, I am just smiling ear to ear. I love this theme. I mean,
I'm dancing.
You can hum it. Yeah, you can tap your toe to it. And it is just so 70s. That's awesome. I love it. I had to play that. After Star Trek went off the air, there was a 27-month period when there wasn't much new science fiction on TV. There was Trek in reruns, and, oh boy, there was Lost in Space in reruns. And then in the fall of 1971, along came this British show called UFO.
Yeah, it was something really different we hadn't seen before. Had this really unique style, I thought.
It did.
And, at the time, it's set just 10 years away in 1980. So the characters actually were pretty relatable.
Yes. And think about that, too. It was set in 1980. Like that was some far enough in the future that we could have these flying spaceships and stuff. That's wild. Yeah. I think this show, in my opinion, is groundbreaking. And I'll give you a couple of reasons. One of the reasons we made it a topic of this show is because it filled a void in the early 70s at a time when there wasn't much sci-fi on TV, as I just mentioned, other than reruns of Trek, and we said Lost in Space too, and then boom, here's UFO. So I think this program is significant, especially to a Star Trek audience in the 70s for a couple of reasons. And here's number one. UFO gave some comfort, to this growing Star Trek audience. The fact that it was on TV kind of said to them, hey, sci-fi is okay. It's relevant. Here's another form of it, and it's okay for you to like it. And I think the second reason that UFO is sort of important, it really raised the bar for sci-fi producers that came after it. This is a smart, stylish show dealing with some real contemporary issues in 1970, such as politics or drug abuse, adultery, even divorce. This isn't a hokey kids show by any means. It told producers of future shows that, hey, you need to treat this science fiction genre with respect.
Right. It wasn't just, some little hokey thing. Like you said, you actually could have a real drama set in a science fiction background.
And aren't you impressed with how well this universe is thought out?
It's incredible, for the time and the seriousness of the subject matter sometimes.
You kind of looked at the plots and the synopsis. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it from that point of view?
Sure. So I'm not going to go in depth to different episodes, but I'll just give the high level background. So it's the year, as we said, 1980. Ooh.
But I don't remember any of this cool stuff in 1980. Do you?
No, not at all. Pop rocks, maybe.
There you go. Right.
So what's the premise of it? The basic premise is aliens are abducting humans for some unknown reason. We don't know why necessarily. It's hinted at, and we'll get into that in a second. But there's a secret military organization that's just starting to kind of, thwart, however you say that
thwart.
Stop this thwart. Yeah, I hate that word, but but there's no better word for it. And so that organization is named the cool name Shadow.
It is a cool name.
It is. Supreme Headquarters, Alien Defense Organization.
That is a cool name.
I love it. So Shadow, how are they defending the Earth? Well, they have three basic ways. They have their main headquarters, which is kind of cool. It's hidden beneath a London film studio, which that adds some fun things. You might even touch upon it in what you're going to talk about, Bob, to the show. But so the second way is they have a base on the moon called Moon Base.
So cool.
Yeah.
So cool.
And they have 3 lunar interceptor spacecraft that carries a nuclear missile
on the nose.
On the nose, right?
Yeah.
And then the coolest thing that they have is a fleet of submarines called skydivers, and they have at the front of the sub is a fighter plane called Sky One.
Yes.
It launches from under the water and shoots out of the water, kind of like you see the missiles shooting out of a submarine.
So much fun. I remember, 10-year-old geeky Bobby watching this going, oh my God, look, there's a jet that shot out of the water. It was just cool. It was just fun adventure. It was just fun.
It definitely. So how this kind of worked, the defense, I laid out the moon base and the main headquarters and skydiver. So what happens is there's a space intruder detector, or a SID. It's a satellite that's orbiting Earth, and it detects an incoming UFO. And moon base launches the interceptors to go and intercept, obviously. And if it gets past them and gets into Earth's atmosphere, then the skydiver launches Sky One and tries to take them out, in the Earth's atmosphere. And if they get past that and they land on the ground, then the mobile units come in.
It's really sort of layers of defense.
Yeah.
Is how they set it all up. So if it gets past the first layer, the second layer comes out. If it gets past that. Yeah. I mean, it's very smartly thought out.
Yep. So some of the characters, and I'm not going to go into all of them, but because there's a ton of characters and they change throughout the episodes, 26 episodes. So it's run by the commander, Ed Straker. And he's basically has dedicated his life at all costs, pretty much, to run this and defend the Earth. He has some of his commanders, Alec Freeman, who's kind of a cool, kind of seemed like a James Bondish type guy to me. Colonel Paul Foster, Colonel Virginia Lake, Moonbase. it changes sometimes, but usually is Lieutenant Gay Ellis. A lot of females on the moon base.
Yeah.
With
And
purple hair.
Gay Ellis is played by British actress Gabrielle Drake, who had a huge acting career on TV later on in the 70s. She became pretty popular in Britain.
So looking at it a little bit, and they all wore purple wigs, though. I guess
I will talk about the purple.
Okay,
wigs.
Good. So we'll get to that later. But you scratch your head and go, "What the heck is that about?"
Yeah,
watching.
Right. I know.
So let's go back to the aliens. What did they want? What did they really want? So at first, and like in the first episode, they're theorizing that they're a dying race and they're harvesting organs from humans to help prolong their lives. And in the episode Identified, Straker actually talks about that a bit. And then also in ESP, they kind of confirm it that their alien species is dying, and now they say they don't want to harm people, but we know they do because they're abducting people. And then later, and this is kind of this cracked me up actually. In The Cat with 10 Lives, they have another theory going that these aliens don't really have a body. They take over the human body as a vessel so they can get around basically and live. But in this episode, they take over the mind of a cat.
That's interesting because that was sort of the type of alien in the show Stargate. They were these symbiotic life forms that had to have human hosts. So that's pretty interesting that they were a little bit ahead of everybody else in that regard.
Yep. I thought that was kind of interesting. And then, obviously you see the aliens, they look very human-like, even though they're in like spacesuits with this greenish hue. Basically, they're in green liquid. They're theorizing again, why is this green liquid? Why are they in this green liquid? And one of the theories is that the acceleration from the space travel, it's hard on the body, so it has oxygen in it. Yes, and it's obviously goes into the lungs and helps stabilize the organs and everything to allow that faster than speed of light, mode of transportation.
So the body would not splat against the wall because it's hollow where the lungs are. You fill the lungs up so it has some mass, so they won't get crushed. Is that the idea?
Yeah, exactly. And that's a much better way to say it too.
And then the pigmentation in their skin is from that liquid, right?
Right. And that theory actually was also from Forbidden Planet.
Oh yes, right. Because they had to be in some kind of stasis beam.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
So some of the other things to just note with just the whole series in general, it usually had a dark story. It really never really ended even happy.
No, they didn't, did they? Everybody's kind of sad in these shows.
Oh yeah, and nobody was taking a back seat to getting into trouble or not getting in trouble, but being in trouble. But some of the things about these episodes that I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about is how the interpersonal relationships, with the characters. It was not seen necessarily in sci-fi then, except for maybe Star Trek.
Yep.
And they even had an episode where there was an interracial relationship, or hinted at a interracial relationship.
Oh yes. Now, it's been months since I've watched it, but I do remember that now that you say that. That's right.
Yep. Computer Affair. Which, there was the Star Trek kiss, right? With this, they had this interracial romance going on, and in British TV, that was very uncommon. So not just relegated to U.S. being uncommon, it was uncommon there. Straker, we hinted at that. His marriage was kind of rocky. He spent 10 years getting this program up and running from the time the first alien abductions were reported to the time they actually kicked off Shadow. I think it was 10 years, wasn't it, Bob?
Yeah, like 70 to 80, right?
Yeah, right. So, his marriage took a toll, and in Confetti Check AOK, they talk about that a lot of backstory and flashbacks and whatnot. But then he also has a little bit of trouble with his marriage and his family in A Question of Priorities, where his son's critically injured. He's flying there with medical supplies and to help his son, but then he, has the conflict of, does he go and get this pick up this defecting alien, before aliens go and grab him, and then Shadow loses the chance to get him.
Such a sad episode.
Yeah,
because he can't. It's one of those shows where the main character can't get a break, and you watch it happen, and you watch his angst over it, and there's nothing he can do. Yeah,
not much. Like I said, these episodes were typically dark. There were recurring themes of, this shadow security, keeping, Shadow from being infiltrated by, aliens or people, that are doing the aliens' work. Keeping Shadow funded. It's a secret organization. Nobody knows about it, and they're trying to keep a lid on these UFO abductions, and they're also trying to stay funded. So that's another continuing theme. And then just the personal lives of the Shadow operatives, and they got to keep everything secret. Like I said, it's the main base is under a Hollywood studio. Well, they integrate into the Hollywood studio as basically employees or running portions of the studio or whatever. So, just keeping everything secret is just a continual challenge.
There's a lot of strife, a lot of angst, a lot of conflict between the characters in the show. I was going to talk a little bit about that myself, but since you're talking about it, nobody stays friends for long on UFO. Right. There is always some form of conflict that pops up that in the end will pit them against each other. It seems like everybody has got some conflict coming somewhere. There's especially so much conflict for Straker. He is
a magnet for conflict.
Yes. In a way, he is a form of Captain Kirk in that he is the lonely guy at the top. And he's got to deal with the political pressure like Kirk deals with the admirals and Starfleet Command. Straker's got to deal with that crazy Colonel Foster. Anyway, he's got to deal with that guy who's openly antagonistic. Then there's a board that he has to deal with. And, of course, then he's got to turn around and be the nice guy when he's talking to his troops below him, if he can. So Straker's in that no-win position of constantly dealing with issues from both below and above him. That was my 2 cents. Sorry, go ahead.
Yep. That's kind of my take at the high level synopsis of what goes on the show. And
well, it's a really got a neat history too, a production history. It premiered in the UK and Canada in 1970. It came to the US in 1971. It was created by Jerria. Let me say that again. It was created by Jerry and Sylvia Anderson. You see what I was doing? I saw Jerry and I saw Sylvia and I said Jerria. I think I'm going to name my next kid that. Okay.
Yes.
They had created a number of kids shows in the 60s. Shows that some people might know the names of: Supercar, Stingray, Fireball, XL5, The Thunderbirds. There was a movie, about 8 or 10 years ago, sort of a remake of The Thunderbirds, though that is a Jerry and Sylvia Anderson show. Those shows used what the Andersons called super marionation. Puppets.
Super marionation.
And the reason it was super marionation is because these puppets not only control their arms and their legs and their heads, there were also wires and controls inside of their heads to make them blink and to make their mouths move. And some of them even had eyebrows that moved. So that was super marionation. So that was sort of advanced. It was far beyond, just plain puppets. But UFO was the first live action show they'd ever done. It took over a year to shoot. One of the reasons it took long is because there was a labor strike. In the middle of shooting, they actually had to experience their studio being closed. So they had to find another production home, another studio. And at that time, not a lot, but a few of the actors, Gabrielle Drake being one of them, said, "You know what, we're kind of done with this. We're going to move on."
Yeah. We're done waiting for you.
Yeah, we're kind of done waiting. They got other gigs. But it appears that the cast, there's continuity throughout the entire 26 episodes because they aired out of production order. And so, there's Gay Ellis, Gabrielle Drake, who was only there for the first 6 months, but some of her episodes appear at the end, so it looks like she's always there.
I wondered about that.
Yeah. The 26 episodes dealt with some adult themes. We mentioned this earlier, such as adultery, divorce, drug use. Let's talk about the special effects for a second, because I think they were outstanding for their day. They do use miniatures, but they were using techniques that were perfected on the Andersons' earlier shows, on Supercar, on Thunderbirds, things like that. So when you see the interceptors take off, those are actually little models being shot. They are not blue screen effects like Star Wars and Star Trek later used. Pretty cool. I think they're very, very well done.
Yeah. Well, they even, directly use some things like getting into the vehicles. They would go down that chute.
Yes.
Thunderbirds use the exact same thing.
Yes, and that's a great way to get the human actors out of the shot. Let's get them out of the shot. So we don't actually see them climbing in the interceptor. We just see them sort of sliding out. And the next thing we know, we see the interceptor taking off. It's a great little editing and special effect technique.
Yep.
Where the actors never really have to go to the interceptor. That saves them a lot of money by doing that.
Right.
Let's talk about some notable aspects of the production. The look, number one. Wow, these are some very cool costumes. Yes, they are the silvery spacesuit when we go to Moonbase. They're still pretty cool. And what's cool about them is that when they're in their interceptors, the pilots, they have more of a flight suit look to them. But when they're just sort of walking around the Moonbase, well, then they're in this casual silvery spacesuit look.
Yes.
And I don't know if you remember, I think it was either the pilot or an early episode where Gay Ellis is walking and she's in the locker room with the pilots and she just sort of takes off this wraparound skirt.
Right.
But I was really, I don't know about you, but I was kind of surprised that the women and the men were right there, boom, in the same locker room, and she's kind of undressing, and it was all good. The business suits, cool look. It is a look that you could project forward of even where we are today. The clothes did not look futuristic. They weren't the Star Trek pajama tops. They were suits. They had a shirt underneath, maybe a vest, a jacket that went over top. And if you notice, for a lot of those, it was simply just turning the collar up in the back.
Right.
Or a shirt with no collar. But just something that made it a little bit different. But boy, it was believable. You could look at that and you could say, yeah, I could see somebody wearing something like that.
Yep. And 10 years in the future, yeah, that's a believable, suit.
Exactly. Great vehicles. First, let's start with Straker's car. Oh my God, is that cool? The gull wing doors.
Yep.
The shape of the car, the point, that's just a cool car. That is really
that
neat.
car.
Me too. I love Sky One and the submarines. Very, very cool. The interceptors, what a great design those are. Just a great job developing those kinds of vehicles. Even the mobile units, the little, I guess you'd call them, let's just call them mobile units. The mobile units.
That's what they call them.
That's
mobile
right.
Units.
Are really, really cool. The multi-purpose mobile units that would go out in the field. The sets are very cool. Straker's office, that's a cool environment. And then the moon base, I thought they did a very nice job creating a shirt sleeve environment on the moon, but yet it still looked pretty believable, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I thought it did.
Yeah. The music, well, we've played the music. Hold on a sec.
Here we go.
This is a cool theme, man, for 1970.
It is.
It's got that rock organ going, you got some guitars playing. It's got a great beat. Yep. And the thing is, when the show's over, you kind of walk away and you're humming it. Yeah. It's stuck in your head. At least for me, it is. It's one of those tunes that just sticks with you. I like the music in it a lot. Even when it's a little more of a tense scene, it's still that theme, but now it's strings. It's more tense. It's very well done. You talked about the relationships. They're very realistic and believable. That was done on purpose. They wanted conflict. The producers wanted conflict. Again, these are producers of kids' shows doing a very adult program here. They wanted human interactions that were real. And I think they delivered it. I do.
Oh, yeah.
These people...
they wanted a drama.
Yes.
They wanted to do a live-action drama.
Huh. And what show do we know that did something like that, too? Was it Star Trek?
Star Trek, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, these people have arguments. They have fights. They... At one point, they really get into loud shouting matches, Absolutely. It's an interesting show with a lot of conflict, but that makes it interesting. Here's a couple of did you knows. Here's the first. The female moon base personnel, they wore purple, pink, and sometimes blue wigs. You brought it up earlier. They did this production-wise because Jerry Anderson thought the color just looked really cool under the set lights. Sylvia Anderson did a lot of the costume design. So she designed their uniform from the neck down, and she was thinking that they should have some kind of hat. It's 1970. If you remember, stewardesses still wear a hat. Nurses still wear a hat. She's thinking in military terms about some form of hat, but nothing looked good. And then she tried a wig on a model, and the wig just made the whole outfit pop. And she just decided, well, you know what? The uniform hat is a purple wig.
There you go.
So there you go.
Yeah. Well, at the time, late 60s, early 70s, wigs were popular. Women wore wigs all the time. And she was speculating that, that would just be a thing.
She was.
Keep going forward.
She was. Very interesting idea. So the because we do see the character Gay Ellis in a flashback or off moon base with brown hair. When she's away from the moon base and not on duty, she doesn't have the purple hair. She has her own hair. So it very much carries forward that idea that this is just part of the uniform. Let's talk more about hair. Ed Bishop, who played Straker, his hair was actually bleached for the series early on. But they were afraid to keep doing that because he's got brown hair. And they were afraid that continually bleaching his hair would really damage it. So by the second half of the season, they decided to just get him a wig. And so he wore the wig. And then later on, when he did conventions, he would bring the wig with him and wear the wig on stage, too. In the United Kingdom, people drive on the left. In the show UFO, they drive on the right. And the steering wheel is on the left, as it is in America. And the producers were trying to sort of, again, project forward. They just sort of thought that, well, over time, the UK is just going to conform with the rest of the world and end up driving on the right. So we're going to say that's what they do.
That didn't happen.
No, not really, no. And when we're talking about Ed Bishop, there is a Star Trek connection. In 1973, he did the voice of Asmodeus in the animated series episode, The Magicks of Megas Tu. And if you watch that episode, it's where the crew is on trial in what looks like old Salem, and Asmodeus is one of the pilgrims putting our Enterprise crew on trial. In 1971, when the show came to America, the initial ratings in syndication looked really good. And in fact, they looked so good that the studio said, you know what, let's go ahead and do a second season. And so they began doing a lot of pre-production. In fact, they invested a ton of money. They developed set designs. In some cases, they even built some sets. And then the second half of the season aired, and the ratings fell off. And the studio said, you know what? We're thinking maybe we won't move forward with the second season. So there's Anderson stuck with all of this work, and he didn't know what to do with it. He didn't want to just throw it out. So he decided to take all that pre-production work, those designs, and repackage all of that and pitch another show. That other show was Space 1999, and it finally aired in 1975.
Yay. Love that show.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that one down the road.
Next week, James Doohan, the actor who portrayed my favorite character in Star Trek, Montgomery Scott. We'll see you then.
Thanks for listening to 70s Trek, an independent fan production. Join us next week as we explore more about the production, the actors, the producers, and the influencers of Star Trek in the lost decade of the 1970s on 70s Trek.